We are live now. All right, Ladies and gents, welcome to Shop Talk with MADDOG, episode 10, the actual episode 10 this time, with Senator. Hey, dude, good to see you.
Good to see you, Mad Dog. How you been, man?
Hey, we just quickly discussed this. Life is good, life is good. It's been a while since Tailhook. Good to see you again. Um,
Yeah, thanks
so,
for having me.
hey, it's a pleasure. So, obviously, under normal circumstances, we'd be doing this over a beer, but 3 hour time difference, you know how it is. So,
It is what it is.
let's start off, the usual intro questions. Uh, so, tell me a bit about yourself. Where are you from? What got you into aviation? Where do you go to uni? A bit about your career path so far in the Navy.
Yeah. So, was born. I'll start at the beginning. Born in Pax River.
Mm,
Um, Kind of lived all over, but ended up growing up in Southern California,
mm-hmm,
so near where I fly now, Point Mugu. Went to college at Chico State up in Northern California, and was kind of always wanted to do the naval aviation thing. Got to that point, we all get, like all of us, I got bit by that bug as a kid, like you did, like we all do.
yeah.
Um, and and I got to the point where I said, hey, I either, I'll give this thing a go or not. Um, Went to officer candidate school, flight school, all that good stuff. Ended up flying E2Cs out of Point Mugu for my fleet tour, and then for my first shore tour, flying E2Ds and C-130 Tangos for a test squadron out in Point Mugu. So I've been lucky to stay kind of close to home my whole time thus far.
Very, very nice. So, I'm assuming that the KC-130 position, you guys are mostly doing range stuff over the missile range and stuff like
A little
that,
bit.
or?
That's a great question. It's really diversified recently.
Mm,
So we were primarily range clearance, and then the Navy's got a couple islands, San Nicolas and San Clemente. We'll
mm-hmm,
take, especially San Nicolas, they've got a full-time staff out there, so we'll take supplies out there every other week. Um, Historically, it was all range clearance.
mm,
We now also do aerial refueling. We've started that back up, and we just started a couple new mission sets that actually have kind of a tactical edge to them, which is cool. So we're leaning into the research and development piece a little bit with some new capabilities, which is exciting.
yeah, for sure, for sure. But the first thing I want to touch on is let's talk a bit about your fleet tour with the Sun Kings. Obviously, you and I
Yeah,
have a couple mutual friends. Jamboy
yeah,
Kirksey, for one. Love him. Who doesn't,
yeah.
right?
Great
Jamboy
guy.
is quite the
Hey, I
character.
went to high school with Jam Boy.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Dang.
yeah. Great guy.
But yeah, Jamboy's quite the character. I'll be having him on the show at a later date. But let's talk a bit about your fleet tour. What's it like flying the Hawkeye? Are you guys really the best ball flyers in the Navy? Let's be real here. In my personal humble opinion, you guys are. Sorry, the C2 guys don't do it at night, therefore they're disqualified from the ranking. Let's be real here.
Mm-hmm.
hmm
Sure.
So let's.
Um, yeah, I'll lean into that one. I think that there were two groups I was always very impressed with at the boat,
Mm,
and it was Hornet guys
yeah,
because boy, I'm also an LSO. When you're waving at night,
yeah.
those Hornets come in manuals at night sometimes, and it can be what we would call a very colorful pass.
hmm
Um, Now, I was in my fleet tour. I was on the Nimitz, Air
hmm
Wing 17, and that was the last deployment of a Marine Charlie F-18 Charlie Squadron. So that was the sundowning of um, Hornets at the boat. Now they're still flying. I think exped, and they're doing different stuff. But yeah, they're very good ball flyers. The others, obviously, I do think, yeah, Hawkeyes. I'll just say it's a unique challenge because it's all stick and rudder.
mm,
Um, Before I talk about that, I'll say fleet tour was great. Did a fifth fleet deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Some healthy numbers of extensions, but we made it fun in our own way. That was during the whole COVID snafu,
Mm-hmm.
and then we did a seventh fleet tour, and I rotated out about halfway into that one. The
Yeah.
seventh, this I thought that was a lot of fun because on it, I was working in ops, and you're trying to keep people current. They've got to get a night trap every 7 days, and it's like every time everybody's current, we're doing another port call, you know. Um, but yeah, the E2 at the boat is an interesting creature because you do have that instantaneous thrust available to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as soon as you move the power levers, you're going to get movement on those props, and it can get you out of an uncomfortable situation pretty quick compared to the spool up time of a normal turbojet engine. Um, but yeah, I've I've known great ball flyers from every community, but it's always really cool to see a Hawkeye person get like a top hook patch because it's so rare.
Yeah. And the reason I bring up the Hawkeye, you bring up the power. We've all seen the video. I'm sure you've seen it where the Hawkeye was coming in, had a wire snap,
Yep.
drops off the angle, and next thing you know, just powers out of it. That was insane to watch, right? It's
Yeah.
like it just shows how much power those eight-bladed props generate, right? Like
Oh yeah.
there's no way with the original like Charlie model with the four blade that would have ended up in the water easily.
It's it's um it's a combination of a few things. I think it was that very valuable instantaneous thrust,
Mm-hmm.
coupled with, and I wasn't there, but
Yeah.
I would say objectively very good flying and decision making and cockpit, crew resource management and all that good stuff. But the guy, there were two of them. I know one of the pilots,
Mm.
and he certainly received some fanfare for that because it took a lot of quick thinking. Um, and it's you've got to get suck the gear up, go full flaps, max power, set an attitude, and just hang on. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a wild one.
Yeah. And of course, with the Delta model coming in, there's the air-to-air refueling component. So you'll have
Hmm.
mission extension. Has there ever been any thoughts about crew rest on the Hawkeye? Have you guys ever considered throwing a microwave on the airplane or something like
Yeah,
creature comforts, right? Because
that is such a great point. We have made several. We understand most of these recommendations to be in jest because we would love a hammock would be awesome. We would love and these are those creature comforts you talk about that once I started flying the C-130, I was like, man, I could take a nap in this thing.
yeah,
Um, but the problem with the Hawkeye is it's just jam packed full of equipment.
yeah,
So even getting to the cockpit, getting to the aft crew compartment, I mean, it's a tiny. You're squeezed. There's electronic boxes lining both sides. Um, Originally, I think the longest flight I had in an E2C was 6 hours, and about half, not half, a small amount of that was on deck in between launches. I stayed with the bird, and everybody else was a new crew.
mm,
I heard recently of an E2D with AR capability flying at 10:0 at the boat.
ouch,
10 hours at the boat is that's because what you got to remember is you got to come back and land after all that, and it might be nighttime, you know.
mm,
So yeah, crew rest is definitely playing into it. When we heard about the AR capability, one of our questions was, how long do they really want us to be able to fly here? Because we can already fly pretty long time.
yeah,
One of the great things it gives us is now, for example, we have the ability to fly a Hawkeye from California to Hawaii because we can have somebody drag us. Or it basically, one of the cool things is it extends the range of the actual airplane
right,
significantly, even for a respot. If hypothetically speaking, and I don't know of any plans to do this, but if you had to move a Hawkeye squadron, we had a Hawkeye squadron out in Europe not too long ago. A
mm-hmm.
viable way to do that without a carrier, or to get a Hawkeye squadron to even a single Hawkeye to Hawaii, just load it up with four pilots, and one NFO is the mission commander in the back. Now you've got that swappability of pilots so that you're not getting too fatigued.
Yeah. And you mentioned the NFOs here, and I
Mhm.
don't mean this in a offensive way, but is the running joke among the NFOs in the squadron that you guys are just glorified bus drivers?
Right. Yeah. The term I hear sometimes is stick monkey.
Yep.
Uh, it's to be honest, it's one of the things I love about the E2 community is that everywhere you go, you take a party with you. I mean, you've got a huge number of friends. My squadron was very much, we were all best friends, and everybody did their part. I understand that the E2D is different because the pilots are playing more of a tactical role, but with
Mhm.
the E2C, we had a somewhat limited ability in most mission sets to contribute to the tactics.
Mhm.
So what we were able to do is say, hey, my job is get the NFO mission commander and the RO, ACO, SECO in the back,
Mhm.
enable them for success. How do I get them on station where they need to be? I'm working for them. And it's kind of a cool trade-off because in return, I get to be the stick monkey, which is my favorite thing to do.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
flying at the boat. I'm a big stick and rudder guy. Some pilots really get involved in the tactical side of it. I
Mhm.
loved especially the ball flying, the waving, all that stuff. So for me, it was and it is the perfect community. But yeah, I think to a short answer, there is a bit of a running joke that we're the stick monkey, but we're the stick monkey that they're really nice to because they can't see what's going on when we land at night.
Yeah. Exactly. And the the point I was making about the parties, right? You and I met at Hook. For anybody who doesn't
Hmm.
know what Hook is a giant excuse to day drink. Let's be honest. That's
Hmm.
all Hook
Hmm.
really is.
Yep. Yep.
But it's also a networking opportunity,
Hmm.
which is why we're here now. But regardless,
Absolutely.
um, you know, you roll into any of the admins on Saturday night, and there's always going to be at least one complete Hawkeye crew there, right? Like
Oh yeah.
it's not, there's the team aspect of working the Hawkeye that's very integral to the mission set, right? Like a lot of I grew up in the single seat fighter mentality where it's like who needs the extra weight in the back, but the reality is, as somebody who's trying to get into the RCAF as an air weapons controller, right?
Hmm.
The backseaters are probably they are the mission, right?
Oh
We kind
yeah.
of touched
Oh
on
yeah.
it. We kind of touched on it through the stick monkey part of it, right? It's they are the
Mhm.
mission. Without them, there is no Hawkeye,
Right.
right?
And increasingly so. A lot of what we do is changing, and
Mm,
we went from the days, World War One, where guys were throwing grenades out of planes, basically.
yeah.
World War Two, where dogfighting was all visual. Korea, we started to see, rockets become a thing. Vietnam missiles, and I'm paraphrasing. I know there's probably a couple inaccuracies in what I'm saying, but
Hmm.
we've moved into the beyond visual range realm where an individual fighter on its own is much less capable than a fighter supported by a command and control platform, like the Hawkeye, like an AWACS, like I'm sure you've heard about the it's an Australian the Wedgetail. That's a
Wedgetail,
new
yeah.
one coming in. Yep. But overall battlefield management and situational awareness as time goes on is becoming increasingly critical. And that's when, the NFO Hawkeye really, or sorry, the Hawkeye NFO rather, really comes alive. You know what I mean? That's their bread and butter. So as we see time continue on, I think their role is only going to become more and more critical.
Yeah. Especially with 174 Bravo coming online, as I talked about with Mooch Carroll the other day, because with the ranges that 174 is bringing to the table, it's highly likely that the Hawkeye is going to serve basically as a giant AUG-9 and then take over the data link after it's fired by a shooter, right?
Yep.
We might see that, and that's something that I think a lot of people forget is that, for lack of a better term, in the near future, in a hypothetical near peer, the Hawkeye might go kinetic in air quotes, for lack of a better
Hmm.
term, right?
Right.
So
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the idea, but of a fighter being, or an attack aircraft shifting roles in some situations to being a, weapons delivery aircraft,
yeah,
with targeting provided by third party, all that kind of, what I call future boy stuff.
yeah,
Um, but it is, yeah, I mean, it's a whole new ball game.
yeah. The rebirth of the almighty outer air battle, Phoenix 2.0, as I jokingly call it,
That's
right?
right. That's exactly right.
But
Yeah, it's been wild because it's, you know, something I never expected before I started this is that some of the most capable mission critical people that I've worked with, especially now that I've been on the test side of the house,
mm,
are DoD civilian engineers. Because
mm,
you'll meet some folks that are, you would pass them in the street and say, oh, that's kind of a bookish figure. That's,
right,
you know, I don't want to use the term nerd. Nerd would be used lovingly,
yeah,
but these are some of the smartest people I've ever met, and they are the enemy's worst nightmare. Is the joke that we have,
right.
because it takes all types. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. And switching gears here for a second, what's it like?
Sure.
What's it like flying the 130? Because I have a next door neighbor of mine when I'm back home with my parents, who flew 130s for the RCAF. Is there anything different about the 130s operated by a VX30, or not really?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So the Navy, a lot of people say Navy C-130s. That's not something most people even know, even pilots know is a thing. There's two ways to fly C-130s in the Navy. We've got our VR squadrons, which is reservist logistics squadrons. They
Mm-hmm.
fly the KC-130 Tango, with an eight-bladed prop. And then you've got the VX squadrons, which is VX, I think it's VX 20 out on the East Coast and then VX 30 on the West Coast. We
Mm,
fly four bladed props. So we're still flying the old ones. Um, it's a totally different flying experience. And some of the pilots at VX 30 were P3 pilots in a previous life. And for them, I think it's a little, obviously it's more similar. It's foreign engines, but they're able to kind of sidestep a little more seamlessly than the Hawkeye folks. It's a different flying mentality where in the Hawkeye community, the phrase "prop fail to feather" is like, oh man, this is a serious emergency. We got to solve this problem fast. We can't keep altitude. We can't keep airspeed. In the C-130, they might say, oh, we have a prop fail to feather. All right, because you got three other huge props out there.
right.
You have a lot of options. Flying characteristics, it's a boat, man. The thing is like it's like driving, your grandma's Oldsmobile. It's like, you'll put in a control deflection and kind of count to 10, and then you'll slowly start to feel like, oh, there she goes.
Right.
Um, ton of fun to fly. The legs are long. You can go just about anywhere.
Mm,
Um, the differences that we have, we're doing refueling, which hasn't been, you might be surprised to hear that the Navy hasn't done a lot of refueling in the last few years. There was a mishap a few years back, and we kind of, I think, took a pause on it. But we're back up to speed there. So we do a lot of refueling support for VX9 out in China Lake. We'll give them extra legs out in the whiskey areas. Um, we're leaning into a couple new mission sets that a couple of them I'm gonna keep up my sleeve for now because you'll have to wait and see. They're gonna be kind of exciting in the future. But
mm-hmm.
the ones I can talk about, we've got a fuse tank, which is, it's funny. Everything's weight and balance in the C-130,
Right.
but they've got a huge tank. It almost looks like a steampunk uh, bomb or something. It's huge, and
Yeah.
they roll it into the back, with a lift. But they'll roll it forward, secure it in these points where makes the weight and balance happy, and it carries even more gas, and it gives us higher aerial refueling pressure to get, I think we're getting 2,000 pounds per minute out to receivers, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
Um, One of the new missions we're leaning into is a comms relay platform.
Hmm.
So the theme here is we went from basically just being logistics support to all of a sudden we're being invited to go play with the fighters for a number of different missions, and it's exciting. And I'll say it's because we had some folks show up that were pretty tactically savvy. Um, VX30 is unique in that we've got people from every community. We've got people from the fighter community, the growler community, sorry, fighter attack, growler, Hawkeye, the MPRA community.
Hmm.
So it kind of becomes this hive mind of, hey, what can we revolutionize and do better or do that's new? So yeah, we've been getting pretty tactical, which has been fun.
Hmm. And of course, I know that the this is all public record. I'm speaking here unclassified, but the
Oh,
Takamo
cool.
plat
Yeah, of course.
the E6 Mercury, the Takamo is going to get replaced by the 130 in the near future, right? Is that something that you guys are working with, or is that just going to be an off-the-shelf conversion that's going to go directly to the fleet? How are they going to?
Yeah, it's funny to hear you say that because I've had my head in the sand so much with what we've been working on. I hadn't even heard that yet. But I mean, that's the C-130. I'm not surprised to hear that. The C-130 is taking a number of other platforms jobs, and the reason for that, the C-130, along with I want to say there's an Air Force bomber, but it's one of the first two aircraft that'll not only be produced for 100 years, but will also, I said it backwards, but it's going to fly and be produced on the line for 100 years, which is pretty incredible. This the C-130 it's an example of one of those airplanes that they made, and they said, "Wow, this is pretty good." We're good for a while, and they made updates to it, obviously, and new versions of it, but it's a workhorse. For example, NOAA is getting, they're retiring their P3s, and they're
Hmm.
going to bring in C-130s to do that job. So C-130s are here to stay.
Yeah. Because originally the Takamo, it's actually funny because originally the Takamo role was conducted by C-130s for quite a while in the 60s, 70s, up until their
Oh, is that
replacement by
right?
the E6. So in reality, we're actually going backwards in a
Yeah,
way to the
yeah.
J models being used for Takamo in the near future. I think IOC is sometime in 27 or 29, one of the two.
Wow. Okay.
So
Well, that's exciting.
yeah, it really is. Switching gears here for a sec, let's talk. I know I'm very immersed in fighter culture, and you can
Sure.
tell. I literally wear it on my sleeve, dude. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. Trust me, I hang out with fighter pilots. Most of my best friends are, yeah. I get to hear about pointy nose fun all the time.
so let's talk a bit about the culture of a Hawkeye squadron. Is it similar to being on a fighter squadron? Are the admin shenanigans as legendary? Like, what's it
Oh,
what's it like?
yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. The way I put it is tail hook is tail hook.
Yeah,
We are the joke that we make is we're the ugly redheaded stepchild of the air wing.
yeah,
But we are best friends with all the other, VFA bros and sisters and the VAQ as well.
yeah,
Um, it's an awesome part of the air wing. Because like I said, if you're in a VFA squadron and you're at the O Club in Fallon and the Hawkeye squadron shows up, it's a huge group of your friends. And you get really close with the air wing from, like I just said, Air Wing Fallon. You'll also go out, you'll do Tista and OHARP, and I want to say I'm saying OHARP correctly, but you'll do a number of workups, just even showing up as a new guy or girl in the fleet. That by the time you're on the boat, every time you go to the boat, it's like a high school reunion kind of where everybody's like, "Hey, how you been?"
yeah.
And you just get very close. On top of that, waving together for the LSO side of the house, wave teams are really cool because it's typically one person from each squadron on each team.
Hmm.
And my air wing, we did 4 teams. So you've got day 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you rotate. Every fourth day, you're waving instead of flying. And you've got down the line a person from each, the 3 VFA, the 1 VA, the Marine Squadron, and then a VAQ, as well as a Hawkeye individual. So that's another way that you get really close with other folks from the air wing.
Mm. Did Nimitz run out of crayons when 323 was aboard?
Oh yeah, big time. It yeah, the snakes, they're a good group. They're a real good group. I am very nostalgic about flying with Marines because, as you know, we go through all of our training with Marines,
Yep.
and being a tailhook pilot, it's like cool. I'm flying with Marines again, and some of them are people you went to flight school with. When the Marines left, losing Marines from an air wing, you lose a certain sense of adventure there. That I think kind of what I'm getting at. It's
Yeah.
yeah, there's some craziness when the Marines are around, but the Marines are starting to come back to air wings with the F-35. So I think that'll be great. My second cruise didn't have Marines, and I missed them.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And from I know you're not one of the backseaters, but from a fighter control perspective, what's the minimum manning? Is it always three in the back, or could you operate the airplane with two if you needed to?
It's I have been in situations where we had to use two. It's
Mm.
doable, but our playbook is designed to have, you've got a mission commander.
Mhm.
You've got somebody who's dedicated to radar operation, and then you've got somebody dedicated to the fight.
Mm.
Um, it's and I'm an NFO in my community would harass me for how simple I made that sound, I'm sure.
Right.
But you could, there it depends on the mission.
Right.
Depends on the mission. There, especially if you're doing something with, more than one lane and things are getting crazy. There are times I'm sure they wish there were four.
Mm.
And in fact, the E2D, the the term is tactical fourth operator. They've
Mm.
got a pilot in the right seat in the front with a full display, so they can basically turn their display into something where they can help pull some weight as well.
Mm.
Because what that suggests to me is more is always better. More hands, more trained people helping out.
Right. Right. So, going back a bit to the Hawkeye behind the boat.
Yep.
I'm good. I'm good acquaintances with Wombat T.R. Matson.
Okay,
Um,
great.
and he, of course, he was originally scheduled to be on the show. He had to bow out for reasons. Long story. Anyways, the point I'm making is the like we all know that some Grumman products, looking at you, Tomcat, are a handful
Yeah.
behind the boat.
Yep.
Um, what's the Hawkeye like behind the boat?
We I'll start by saying we have been told that there were two pieces of technology that have been around, for a while in different iterations that we could look forward to getting.
Hmm.
One is a HUD. A HUD would be magical because it's not fair, right? They have us do flight school, and you start in the T6 where your right hand's on the stick and your left hand's on the throttle, and then they have you fly the T44 where your left hand is on the yoke and your right hand is on the throttle. And then they have you fly the T45 where your right hand is on the stick and your left hand is on the throttle. And then they have you fly the Hawkeye where you switch it again. And I'll tell you a quick story. The RAG had the Hawkeye RAG,
Hmm.
Fleet Replacement Squadron, had a Jet Bro flying with one of the, I think, department heads or the skipper or somebody. And they went to wave off, and this was at the field, but they went to wave off. And in a Hawkeye, what do you do when you wave off? You max power and then hold your AOA and then pull back and set a rate of climb, you know, normal wave off.
Right.
Well, in a jet, so in other words, to oversimplify it, you wave off in a Hawkeye, right hand goes forward, left hand goes back.
Right.
In a jet, left hand goes forward, right hand goes back, and you
Right.
get that muscle memory.
Right.
So this jet bro flying, left hand goes forward, right hand goes back, puts them into a dive at idle, and it's just brainstem. So the other guy says, "Whoa, whoa," and they get out of there just fine. But the Hawkeye, because of um, how many things are at play, P factor, a lot of yaw, rudder coordination, it takes a long time to get comfortable with. Um, when it came to that HUD I was talking about, we were told, well, there's nowhere to put it. Sure, I get that. It's jam packed full of really great tech for the back. And then we said, what about a helmet mounted display? That would be great. We're still waiting to hear back on that one. The other thing that would be very helpful that we've heard talks about that is being worked on is, it's called ILM. So the jets have PLM,
Mm-hmm.
precision landing mode. Ours is improved landing mode. It's like, well, it'll be better than what you've got. Um, the complication there is you're not only one, we don't have fly by wire, so
Right.
there's no computer to control it. So it would have to potentially work with the props to make it feasible, and it's just a very complicated endeavor. So we're hoping to get that. One of the issues they're running into is T45 students. The T45 is aging,
Yeah.
and it's already got a replacement. I think was it the T7. The replacement for it likely will not go to the boat. And the E2 community and the C2 community, who's obviously they're kind of going away slowly but surely. We're saying, well, we really don't want our students going to the boat for the first time in a Hawkeye because there's so much going on. We're waiting to find out how they're going to handle that. About half, the last I heard from my buddies in Meridian, about half the students going through are not going to the boat in the T45. So from a Hawkeye perspective, we're saying, hopefully that doesn't happen to the guys and girls flying E2s. But to get back to your question, behind the boat, so the number that I heard early and that I agree with now is 500 hours in the Hawkeye to get comfortable behind the boat. Night landings are never going to be fun. It's, for the first, and the 500 was pretty accurate because before I had 500 hours, when I would land at night, I would get leg shake, because your adrenaline's going crazy. You got this, black hole effect. And I would trap, and you'd feel the weight, of catching the wire, and my right leg would shake, which I think was just adrenaline leaving the body. But you're like, that's strange. That can't be good. But if you want to make a correction, if you're seeing a low ball, you've got to add power, you've got to add right rudder, you've got to stop the plane from wanting to pop a slow, because as you add power, nose goes up and right. And if you're waving and you give a power call, you might see a flash of a slow because the plane is going to want to do that. So it's almost like you're kind of whisking an egg. You've got this egg beater thing going. Your feet are kicking around because it has this tendency to want to do what we call the Freddie Mercury, right?
Mm.
Uh, it's one of the great things that we have is a two pilot cockpit.
Mm-hmm.
That's invaluable because there are times when the person flying in the left seat is locked in and just focused on, getting on deck safely. And you've got another person who can kind of have a big picture essay bubble to say, hey, let's not forget about this, or hey, I see something, or hey, somebody just ran across the LA, you name it. So it's very much a team activity, but yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Now, there are people who would say, well, E2 pilots want everyone to believe it. It's the most difficult. And I am an E2 pilot. So, take what I say with a grain of salt. But I'll also say it's incredibly fun at the boat because you really feel like you feel like you're doing it the way that it's always been done. It's
Mm.
you're 100% of the solution. And during the day, flying the Hawkeye at the boat during the day, I think those are my best flying memories. You come into the overhead stack, the tanker is above you, hits you up, says, "Hey, you want to join up?" Tanker gets on your wing, you bring him into the overhead, rip it off. Those those are the best. Well, second best. The best Hawkeye carrier recovery you can do is a pinky case one
Mm-hmm.
during the day that counts, or I guess, that's very rare, but even a case three pinky where they're like, yeah, it was pretty dark. We're going to count that as your night trap. And it's like, oh, I got to do a day recovery, a pinky with the sunset, and it's a night trap. So,
Yeah. For my audience, case one, two, and three are just the different weather conditions behind the boat when you're landing. Just for my audience to make that quite clear to my non-flying audience. For those of us
sure.
in the know, we know, but for my non-flying audience, case one is basically a visual approach. Case two, as I recall correctly, is instrument, and
Half and
then
half. Yeah.
case three is night.
Yep.
Yeah,
Or really bad weather.
yeah. So that's a short and condensed version of case one, two, and three for my non-flying audience. So,
Yeah.
um, moving on here for a second, let's talk a bit about being paddles.
Okay.
So, obviously, I've had multiple paddles on the show over the years, um, or over the first season. Gil Rude, former Blue Angel, he was paddles for a while. The great Nasty Manazar, our illustrious chairman, was also paddles. So I've had a couple of the paddles on the show over the years. So let's talk a bit about your most what was LSO school like? If you went to LSO school, which I'm assuming you
Hmm.
did. Uh, what
I
was
did.
your most interesting like night behind the boat? Is there any stories you can share about
Oh, yeah.
interesting wave offs or stuff like that? Like just a quick. We could be here all day telling stories like
Yeah.
this, but just
Yeah.
like the one that sticks out in your mind. Um, and
Yeah.
and my final is kind of a half joking question. Why have they not named one of the LSO awards after Bug Roach?
Well, you know what? When you get LSO of the year, I think is the correct award that I'm thinking of. It is a statue of Bug Roach. It is, and it's him waving, and Jamboy made sure to bring the statue to the pool party. So everything was done in accordance with LSO NATOPS there.
Although the
Um,
pool party was miserable, let's be honest.
it was freezing. It
Yeah.
was freezing, and you know what? There was VX9 was still out there in their speedos, which I respected. Um, so LSO school, and first of all, I want to preface by saying you have had some absolute legends on the show, so I'm honored that you let a plebeian like myself come on. Thank you, because yeah, I was listening to some of the episodes. I was like, man, there's some legends. I don't know, I don't know if I can hold a torch here, but very honored to be here. Um,
My pleasure.
LSO school is the way that it is jokingly referred to is it's 2 days of training squeezed into 2 weeks.
Mm.
So it's a lot of partying. That's the joke, right? And that's what the front offices that send us there. Usually after a deployment, they know, okay, go to LSO school. It's also some of the best training I've ever done. So you'll show up, and the instructors at the schoolhouse are always absolute legends. Um, you'll show up. We were very lucky. We did an exercise with the Indian Navy,
Mhm.
and they had some MiG pilots that were awesome. and we flew with them. Very professional, very courteous, pleasure to fly with. We flew some low approaches on the Indian carrier. We got to wave some MiGs to low approaches on the Nimitz. So really cool. And then we show up at LSO school, and those same pilots were there in our class. And it was crazy because, you meet these Indian fighter pilots, and they all have advanced degrees. They're engineers. Some of them, one may have had a PhD. They're these very, very humble, professional, educated guys. And then you see the Navy guys, in their Speedos at tailhook, and you realize, like, to be an Indian pilot, you have to have all these advanced degrees. To be an American Navy pilot, you have to know some good jokes and not rub people too much the wrong way. Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's LSO school. You show up, um, mimosas just to get back on top,
Yeah.
get in
Okay.
the right headspace. But they'll have an instructor. The first part of the day is lectures,
Mm.
and the instructor will make himself a drink, stand there, and this is, I think, some of the really good training is what we call scary TV.
Mm-hmm.
You'll watch hours of footage while you're there of mishap, uh, plat cam footage behind the boat.
Yeah.
You'll say, hey, this went right, this went wrong. What could have been done differently? Well, you'll run ARBs, which is like a recovery bulletin to figure out, the correct. Hey, what landing weight do we want to have this aircraft? How much wind do we need across the deck? So there is some smart person stuff that goes into it, but it's a ton of fun. After lectures, you'll have lunch. Maybe they'll barbecue, maybe they'll order something, and then you'll go down into what's called the Thunderdome. And the
Mm.
Thunderdome, this whole place, for a pilot, it's like being at Disneyland because
Mm-hmm.
it's like you're in Mecca. It's unreal. And you go into the Thunderdome. It's like 3 stories of heaven, right? And they got a big beard eye table in the middle, and you'll rotate in and out of the simulator. The
Mm-hmm.
simulator is like the most incredible thing I've ever seen.
Mm.
I'd call it probably 280. It's like 320-degree screen, something like that wraps all the way around. And you've got an LSODS, which is the platform, display.
Mm-hmm.
And they have airplanes come in, and you wave them in a variety of different situations, conditions, weather. Fantastic training. It really is fantastic training.
Mm.
Obviously, you get really close as an air wing when you do all that fun stuff together, and yeah, it's a great 2 weeks.
Mm. And as for what was your what was your the wave off that sticks, or the controlling of the airplane that sticks out in your mind? What was that one incident where you're like, this sticks out in my mind?
We had There's been a few. I think one that was pretty uncomfortable. The tanker was the last recovery of the night,
Right.
and great guy flying, you know, uh, flying an Echo model F-18,
Mm-hmm.
and trapped gas.
Mm.
Couldn't, I'm not as smart on the fuel system of the Rhino, but couldn't accept gas, couldn't use gas. So unusable gas, couldn't get within, an optimal landing
Wait.
configuration because I think it was just not right, right?
Mm.
To put it simply. And this is why it's great to have somebody from every community on a wave team, because when a Hawkeye has a problem, I'm there.
Mm.
And when a Growler has a problem, Growler person's there. But in other words, we had a plane airborne and couldn't use the gas they had. So they were on vapors, basically, on
Mm-hmm.
fumes. Came around, had to get waved off because the deck went foul, something out of our control. And it became kind of you have a side conversation about, how many times are we going to try this before we commit to say, hey, coming back around, we can't afford to have this aircraft flame out on short final, and go into the jet shop.
Right.
And it ended up, yeah, so high stakes, right?
Right.
Now, the cool thing is our CAG paddles, one of our CAG paddles was flying the jet, and the other CAG paddles was obviously with us. And the one of the really rewarding things about being an LSO is being the calm voice to kind of things are going crazy, but if you sound crazy on the radio, that's not helping anything, right?
Mm.
Um, Teamwork was really good, and ended up having him come around for one last try, and got him on deck.
Mm.
But had he not landed that time, it would have been like, okay, we may need to talk about having him go starboard D and punch out, or wherever it is they decided,
Mm-hmm.
because we were blue water. He had nowhere to go.
Right.
There was that. There's been a number of we had a hook slap, which isn't great. That's when the hook slaps the back of the boat, gives it a tramp
Mm-hmm.
stamp on the round down.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've had the my favorites, were the Charlies, the F-18 Charlies, full afterburner. You knew they were safe. They weren't in a position where they weren't going to make the ramp.
Mm-hmm.
But the full afterburner taxi ones, because you get all those sparks, and it's like, oh my god.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that fuel emergency was probably one of the least comfortable. I've had a number in the airplane,
Mm.
um, where I'm in the right seat, or in the left seat, and something happens late in the game. And you know, uh, a good example is Iran loves flying drones through the middle of a case one stack, which is like, geez, and the boat will let you know, hey, we've got a UAV 3,000 feet over the ship, and it's like they could not pick a worse place. Iran could not have picked a less desirable place to stick their drone right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, but you name it, all kinds of whack. It's the joke we have is case one is like the Wild West of flying, because you show up during the day, nobody's saying anything on the radio, you find your interval, and you just break it down, make it happen. It's the best.
Right. And going back to the to LSO school and the crash and burn flicks as we know them, um, we've all seen the Platt tape from Planet Clar, right? Going back to your point about, the LSO has to be calm and whatever. The controlling LSO that night was literally screaming at him for power. I'm sure you've seen the tape, right? So it just goes to
I'm not sure I know the one you're talking about.
so F-14 on the way down, right? The big fireball with the F-14 at the end,
Right. Okay.
right? Where the LSO he's like, "You're good, you're good, you're good," and then he calls for power. Piloting command doesn't apply power. He's literally screaming at him for power because the airplane is behind the power curve. Ramp
Hmm.
strike, and then yeah. So it just goes to show the reason I bring it up is that it just goes to show how dangerous the profession can be. But
Hmm.
overall, in over a century of naval aviation, right? As a history major myself, right? So, in over a century of naval aviation, we've been, flying airplanes off boats longer than a lot of us have been alive, right? And it
Yep.
goes back to the culture of excellence, right? I had the good fortune of meeting Royce Williams, right?
Okay.
And he presented me with a coin.
Wow.
So, it just goes to show how, as a community, we're very open and accepting, right? I've mentioned this on other shows, but like, you guys don't treat me any different just because I have a disability. I'm one of the bros, right? I,
Sure.
I still,
Yeah.
I still suck at beer dye, let's be perfectly honest, but you get my
Hey,
point.
you and I both. You and I both. I'll tell you.
You get the point I'm making, right? Like
Yeah.
if you can make it and be one of the bros, you're gonna be one of the bros regardless for life, right? And it's just
Oh yeah.
that that's the beauty of naval air, right? We don't care who
Hmm.
you are, right?
It's one of my absolute favorite things about it, is that we are joined by having been bitten by this bug, the aforementioned bug.
Yeah.
And it's, at that point, the more the merrier. We love making good friends and having good times. And you know what? We talk about aviation so much that we have to make friends, or else we would drive our families insane.
I've driven my parents off a cliff. I'm not
Yeah,
gonna lie, right? Like,
yeah,
Mom, Dad, I love you, and I'm sorry, but not sorry for the years
you're
of
right.
me talking about aviation, right? Like, it's part of who we are at this point,
Hmm.
right? And
Absolutely.
you know, 122's admin is just proof of that. It wasn't fighter exclusive. I think we must have met in CAG 5's admin, or was it 122's? I can't remember. Regardless, right? There was representation from across the naval aviation enterprise. It wasn't, oh, if
Oh
you're
yeah,
not wearing a fighter flight suit, you're not allowed in here. No, that wasn't what
yeah,
it was at all, right? And and that's the beauty of the culture. We are such an accepting like culture, like I've talked about it on
yep,
other shows, but like, for from a part of my mission is to demystify the culture of military aviation as a whole, because there's so much that's poorly interpreted about it. Like just the other day, yesterday actually, I was watching season 8 episode 1 of 911 on Disney Plus. I wanted to rip my hair out. So the episode starts with a Viper crash. So a Viper crashes into a house with a
okay,
live Maverick on the station. Okay?
okay,
They they're like, "Oh yeah, because I was sitting there ripping my hair out cuz I'm like, cuz they're like, "Oh yeah, the airplane should keep flying until it runs out of fuel." I'm like, "No, that's not how that works. When the pilot ejects, the airplane turns into a multi-ton lawn dart, right?" I was sitting there
yeah,
trying not to rip my hair out, right? So the reason I bring and then the firefighters, they get on scene and they sniff hydrazine with no PPE on, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" Right? So that's part of the reason I do this podcast. It's to demystify and like, because I think Mooch said it best. I'm in a good middle ground because I'm not an insider, I'm not an outsider, I'm somewhere in the middle. Therefore, I can use
you're
that to my advantage.
you absolutely can. And the demystification process is awesome because people can say, hey, this is a cool community that's welcoming, that is, I not to be hack about it, but the the more diverse we can be culturally, the better. And that goes down to that party you were talking about, the 122 party. What was that? Was that a what communities was
What?
that? Was that the VAQ one?
No, that was VFA 122, the
Okay,
FRS, wait a minute, the no, West Coast FRS for the Rhino.
got it. Yeah. So, okay, that's a perfect example. So you've got an admin, or I'll make one up. I'll say, hey, we got a Hawkeye admin. Hey,
Right.
we don't want anybody in here unless you're a big wing Bubba. You're not allowed. Well, what you do with that mindset is you miss out on, in reality, we'd say, hey, we got a Hawkeye admin. And they go, hey, the VAQ folks want to show up. And in my head, I'm thinking, we could use a little VAQ spice up in here.
Yeah.
They go, hey, the VFA bros want to cruise over. And you go, you know what? There's nobody with their shirt off. So let's invite the VFA guys because we know that they'll be able to provide that. Everybody brings to the table a cool, it makes this cultural mix, and that translates. This is where it sounds hacky, but that honestly translates to warfighting,
Right.
because when you're looking at solving a problem, you can look at it from one perspective, and that can be an effective perspective. But when you have a diverse mix,
Yeah.
including the VAQ way of thinking, VFA, VAW, the Marine stuff, and then within that, you have people in a ready room that come from all walks of life. You've got the kid from inner city Brooklyn, and you've got the corn fed, kid from Nebraska, and everything in between. They can look at a problem, and now you're having a million different angles on something. So it lends itself to being effective, as well as to throwing a great party.
Right. You know what they say, apes together strong.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right? And then there's Jamboy. Dude rolls up with the giant chain. I'm sure you saw him, right? He had the giant chain on. I couldn't stop laughing.
Yep. Yep.
Right? Like it's
Yep.
just it's part of who we are. We know how to let loose, but we're also some of the most, we know when to let loose, but when push
Mhm.
comes to shove, I've talked about it on other shows as well. When push comes to shove, when it's game time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
And that's something that I think a lot of people could benefit from, that mindset of I can flip the switch between being off and on, right? Like, because I think a lot of people in their personal and professional lives outside of the military, I know for one, I struggle with it, right? The amount of times I've leaked out stories from the admins in public conversations, right? Like that ability to flip the switch on and off is
Yeah.
something that's unique to fighter culture, and that has a wider impact on society, right? You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
so it's just really interesting to me how, people think the military is very rigid. We have no fun around here. No, for
None.
no,
This much. Zero fun allowed.
zero fun allowed. You
Yeah.
just sit there. You're a drone. You follow orders. The reality is much, much different, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And but dude, we've been going at it for 61 minutes. We are 8 minutes off the funny number. If you know, you know.
I know, and I do know.
For my audience, it's common among all of naval aviation, but it started with the fighter attack bros. So I blame my bros in the fighter attack community for this one. But the funny number will forever be funny because the reality is we are all 12-year-olds at heart on the ground.
Yep.
We
Yep.
act like adults in the air, but we're 12-year-olds on the ground.
Hmm.
So, on that note, dude, call sign story. It's a tradition, right?
All
How
right.
did
All
someone
right.
come up with senator for Avery Kennedy?
It was originally, so I showed up at 116 and it was the embroiled senator. And the joke was that, it probably part of it was the last name Kennedy, or, that I think the joke was that I can, like you said, the on and off switch, I can act proper and shake hands and kiss babies and do all that. But the embroiled senator implied this man can never run for any kind of public office, because they also saw the other version, the fun version of me.
Yeah,
Um, the embroiled senator slowly turned into the senator, slowly turned into senator, and then that just stuck. But it's probably due to a couple admins late at night that will have to remain classified, and I'll only be able to share over a beer with you.
you and I have much to discuss at Hook 25.
We do. We do.
Anyways, brother, this has been a ton of fun. Ladies and gents, this has been Shop Talk with Mad Dog, episode 10 with Avery Kennedy. Senator, dude, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you at Hook 25.
Hey, you're the man, Mad Dog. I'll see you there.
See ya.
Thanks for having me.